Europe in 1815 was a powder keg. For over 2 decades, war had ravaged the continent. From the sun-baked fields of Spain to the frozen plains of Russia, Napoleon Bonaparte's ambition had set Europe ablaze. Millions had perished, empires had risen and fallen. Yet amidst the chaos, Napoleon's star had continued to rise. He was a master strategist, a charismatic leader who had risen from humble beginnings to become emperor of the French. His victories were the stuff of legend. But Napoleon's luck was about to change. After a disastrous campaign in Russia, the tide had turned against him. His enemies, sensing weakness, had united against him. Great Britain, Prussia, Austria, and Russia formed a formidable coalition. They were determined to crush Napoleon and restore the old order. Napoleon, however, was not finished. Escaping exile on the island of Elba, he returned to France. He rallied his supporters and raised a new army. The stage was set for a final showdown. The fate of Europe hung in the balance. The small Belgian village of Waterloo, south of Brussels, became the focal point of this epic struggle. Here, on the morning of June 18, 1815, 2 of the greatest armies in Europe prepared for battle. On one side stood Napoleon, the Emperor of the French, with 72,000 men. He was a master of attack, renowned for his speed and aggression. His plan was simple: destroy the Allied army before Prussian reinforcements could arrive. He aimed to crush the Allies swiftly and decisively. Facing him was the Duke of Wellington, commanding an Anglo-Allied army of 68,000 men. Wellington, a cool and calculating leader, was known for his defensive skills. He had chosen his battlefield carefully, a low ridge with a sunken lane concealed behind it. The Duke knew that time was on his side. He needed to hold off Napoleon's attack until the Prussians arrived. The battle began at 11:30 a.m. with a thunderous French bombardment. Napoleon's artillery, some of the best in Europe, pounded the Allied lines. Smoke filled the air, obscuring the battlefield. Then, with a roar that shook the ground, French infantry and cavalry surged forward. The initial French assault fell on the chateau of Hougoumont, a fortified farmhouse on the Allied right flank. The battle for Hougoumont raged throughout the day. French troops attacked again and again, but the British defenders held firm. The fighting was hand-to-hand, desperate and bloody. Hougoumont became a microcosm of the entire battle. The Iron Duke holds firm, the tide turns. Wave after wave of French attacks crashed against the Allied lines, but each attack was met with stubborn resistance. The British infantry, formed in red-coated squares, withstood cavalry charges and artillery bombardments. The French could not break through. Wellington, a master of utilizing terrain, had chosen his position well. The sunken lane behind the Allied lines provided crucial cover for his troops. As the hours dragged on, the tide began to turn. The French were taking heavy casualties. Their attacks were losing momentum. Napoleon, growing increasingly impatient, committed his elite imperial guard to the fight. He believed that this final, desperate gamble would break the Allied line. The Prussians arrived, Napoleon's last gamble. But it was not to be. The Imperial Guard, met by a devastating volley of British musket fire, faltered and fell back. The sight of their elite troops retreating sent a shockwave through the French army. Panic began to set in. At that moment, Prussian troops led by Field Marshal Blücher appeared on the battlefield. They had marched throughout the day to reach Waterloo, and their arrival sealed Napoleon's fate. With the Prussians attacking his right flank, Napoleon's army disintegrated. What had begun as an orderly retreat quickly turned into a rout. French troops, exhausted and demoralized, fled the battlefield in disarray. Napoleon himself narrowly escaped capture. A continent transformed. Legacy of Waterloo. The Battle of Waterloo was a turning point in European history. Napoleon's defeat marked the end of the Napoleonic Wars. France was no longer the dominant power in Europe. The Congress of Vienna, convened in the aftermath of the war, redrew the map of Europe. The old order was restored, albeit with some modifications. The battle also left an indelible mark on the popular imagination. Waterloo became synonymous with decisive victory and crushing defeat. The battle resonated in art, literature, and music for generations to come. It was a stark reminder of the human cost of war and the enduring power of nationalism.